finals are over, and if you follow the show, needless to say, John's disappointed. So let's just dive right into it. Warriors win in 6. John, your general reaction to the finals as a whole, especially the result.
Well, obviously, as a Celtics fan, I'm disappointed. You go the whole playoff run and they had not lost back to back games the entire time. Anytime they lost, they bounced back, and it felt like we could really rely on them to do so. And then I think game 5 was probably the big letdown because they lost game 4. In game 4, I mean, Steph put up like 43 points, so there's only so much you can do. In game 5, Steph goes 0 of 9 from 3, and you still lose the game. And that becomes your first back to back loss in the entire playoffs. And it was just a tough one to swallow, just in general. The way they lost became incredibly predictable. I mean, everyone has heard the stat of if they had over 15 turnovers, they were like 1 of 9 on the whole playoffs. And when they had under 15 turnovers, I think they were 13-2. And so the clear indicator of if they were going to win the game was their ability to hold on to the ball. And the Celtics knew that. Jason Tatum acknowledged that. All of them acknowledged that. Udoka continuously kept harping on it, and they still continue to turn the ball over. The main 3 culprits were Tatum, Brown, and Smart. All 3 of them averaged career highs in turnovers in the playoffs this year. Tatum and Brown both averaged like almost 4 turnovers per game. Smart was around 3. And so that's just not sustainable, especially against the Warriors. The announcement team last night in game 6, they made a great point. Even if the turnover numbers look the same, the Warriors can survive off of that because they had consistent half-court offense. The Celtics throughout those last 3 games just simply did not. They were not able to get a lot going. Tatum wasn't able to initiate a ton. I love Marcus Smart, but they still don't really have a true point guard. And so there's not a lot of pick and roll being run. There's not a lot of just specific things that you see in a lot of staple offenses. And so when it comes down to it, they just weren't able to create a lot of great scoring opportunities. And so when you turn the ball over, you just make that much harder on yourself because you're limiting your opportunities and you're giving your opponent easy transition points. So yeah, it was disappointing. I think the big main takeaways I had for why the Warriors won was, number one, they didn't use that death lineup that we were talking about before the series, where it was Curry, Clay, Poole, Wiggins, and Draymond. It was very rare that all those guys touched the floor together. I think they did in game 1 for about 2 minutes. And then after that, it was pretty rare. The main reason for that was in that lineup, Draymond is the only big man there. Obviously, Wiggins is guarding Tatum. And so you're going to put Draymond probably on any of the bigs, specifically Robert Williams, because nobody else can handle that responsibility. But they wanted to be putting Draymond on Jaylen Brown, and he did a fantastic job on him. I believe Jaylen shot like 29% from the field when guarded by Draymond throughout the series. So Draymond really stepped up defensively. But obviously, with that lineup, like I said, they didn't have the ability to stop Robert Williams or Al Horford typically. So they would bring in a lot of Kevon Looney. They would bring in Gary Payton II. They would bring in a lot of these other guys who could handle defensive duties that Clay and Poole and Curry could not. The main issue that I think the Celtics had, though, with that was when they did go small ball, it was typically Gary Payton II that came in as opposed to like Poole and Clay or Poole and Curry. And that was fine because then you put Gary Payton II on Jaylen Brown. But if the Celtics are going to run out there with Al Horford and Robert Williams against that lineup specifically, and Al Horford is being guarded by Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, the Celtics have to take advantage of that. Al Horford is a really great player. He's a big man. He's a great presence. He's like 6'10" in shoes. And he's just simply probably stronger than anybody on that Warriors team outside of maybe Kevon Looney. But even Kevon Looney, there was a play in game 6 that Al backed him down and got him down all the way right below the basket, and Looney had to end up fouling him. So there was just really no excuse for the Celtics' inability to expose that small ball lineup. And the Celtics just simply never adjusted. The Warriors, I believe, once it was game 4, maybe it was game 3, but I think it was actually game 4, where they benched Kevon Looney. They started Draymond Green, and they started putting Otto Porter into the starting lineup. And then they sort of mixed it around from there off the bench. And the reason they did that is they wanted to get Kevon Looney a big advantage when the bench units came in. So when Robert Williams would leave the court, Kevon Looney would come on and he would sort of just have his way on the offensive rebounds. He was a lot more effective in that lineup because he didn't have to deal with both Robert Williams and Al Horford at the same time, who could switch a lot. And the Celtics they did not punish the Warriors for moving Kevon Looney to the bench like that. And that sort of starting lineup, the Celtics simply they should have just forced the Warriors to go big and bring Kevon Looney back onto the floor with Draymond Green, because as we saw early in that series, Draymond and Looney were both very effective separately, but when they're on the court together, it hurt their offensive spacing a lot. And the Celtics just never forced them to go back to that defensively. And I think that hurt them.
Main thing for me, like you already alluded to, the turnovers, and I think this should deflect some of the blame off of Tatum, put a little bit on Ime, but too many times everyone's just standing around watching Tatum dribble, and too many times it was just hunting for the matchup, hunting for Steph Curry. Okay, ISO, everyone get out of the way. But and credit the Warriors, like you said, credit the Warriors. They won, and they did so. Great defensive scheme. As soon as the switch happened where Curry was on Tatum, they brought over a second guy, maybe not to help right away, but to stand near the paint and take away the middle of the paint. Just make it tough. Stat I want to throw out too to show how Tatum struggled. And I don't even think it's more Tatum struggled, just how good the Warriors paint defense was as a whole. Tatum only had one dunk, and that was game 6. I think that was the only field goal he made in the fourth quarter, that one dunk at the end. That's all he had in the finals. Before that, he hadn't had a dunk since like game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think that shows it was just the Warriors had a really good defensive scheme. Also, on top of just needing more off ball movement in regards to the Celtics, I am with you. I mentioned that too. Like there's too many times where Al Horford had Steph Curry or Gary Payton, just a smaller man on him, and the Celtics couldn't get the ball to him, or when they did, the spacing was poor. I sent you that one picture where there's 3 Celtics right next to each other, like Jaylen Brown's like at the elbow, like just spacing was poor. And Marcus Smart didn't make great decisions either, like you already mentioned. I saw people calling him Marcus dumb. Like there's just times too, like when y'all were actually running a play, like there's one of the times where he just decided to take Draymond to the hole. It's like, no man, run the play, because that play he also missed the layup very badly too. So yeah, Marcus Smart had a rough series offensively. Even Al Horford, I mean, he had a great game 1 and a great game 6, but really wasn't aggressive. And maybe once again, that's part of the reason why maybe he wasn't getting the ball in the post, but just kind of wasn't much of a factor offensively. And it can be tough in that ISO ball type. If you're just hunting for matchups, it's really dependent on one guy, and that's Tatum, initiating the offense. And I think we saw a little bit, just the Warriors threw him some different looks, blitzed them at times. And Andrew Wiggins is a really good defender, because he was able to match his size and athleticism. So, like I've already alluded to, obviously Tatum deserves some blame. This whole series is not his fault. This is still a relatively inexperienced team as a whole, at least in regards to getting this far. Is Ime Udoka's first year coaching. I think we can all say he did a fantastic job defensively. I mean, most of these games, if you could ask, hey, the Warriors are only get around 100 points. And especially like you mentioned, game 5, where Steph Curry makes 0 threes and has under 20 points. I think you take that, you say, man, I think we're probably going to win this game then. So Celtics got some issues to iron out. We'll talk about that later. But and we'll talk about the Warriors and stuff. But credit their offense, to credit Steve Kerr making adjustments on both ends of the ball. Especially got Steph some good, easy open looks in game 6. Draymond finally made 2 threes too. And it just felt like the Warriors had more answers and were able to execute those answers better, plain and simple. And Celtics, they got room to grow. I'm not too worried about them going but yeah, I mean, credit the Warriors. Just they deserve this one. Go ahead.
I do want to say about the Warriors, Shout out Andrew Wiggins. The guy
Yeah.
was the second best player on their team the whole series. He locked up Tatum. So all the criticism that people are throwing Tatum's way, you need to throw an equal amount of praise towards Andrew Wiggins' way because he was a massive reason as to why Tatum struggled. He was the second best scorer on their team through this series, and really underrated was his rebounding. He was the reason they were even allowed to play small ball, was because he was a monster on the boards in this series. The guy simply just outworked everybody. And we were joking about it last night, but whatever Jimmy Butler said to him when he went on his tirade in Minnesota about him and Cat not working hard and giving zero effort, clearly something changed whenever he went to Golden State. And the guy has totally shifted his game, accepted his new role and embraced it. He went from a guy who was expected to be the primary scorer on a team and now accepting a role that he is the second, third, at times even fourth scorer, but he is one of the primary driving forces on their defense, their energy, their effort, and their rebounding, and he excelled in it. So shout out Andrew Wiggins, and also shout out Klay Thompson. The guy's like 1,000 days removed from the last time that he played basketball. I think it was 1,099 days ago that he last played basketball and then tore his ACL and his Achilles and all those things. And now he's an NBA champion again. So shout out Klay for being able to come back, because most people wouldn't from his situation.
Yeah, I do want to comment on Wiggins. You mentioned it real quick. I think the credit mostly goes to, should in reality, non-jokingly, go to the Warriors. And I think this goes for development. Honestly, if I was a development guy, this is what I would do too. You find out what they're good at, let them learn that role, then you expand them from that role. I think Minnesota seemed to give him the keys too early to be, okay, Andrew, you do whatever you want. You figure it out. You be the star. Well, Golden State came over, obviously, maybe humbled by the trade, maybe the trade itself, but obviously, like you mentioned, it molded him. Hey, Andrew, you got great athleticism, man. Like, you can be a really good defender. So let's dedicate you to the defensive end. The offense will come, especially playing with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And we saw this series. I mean, multiple drives to the rim, some solid mid ranges, okay shooting from three, and like you mentioned, very good defense. So, and he's still relatively young too. We forget that he's like around Tatum's age. I think he's like what 25-ish. I should have looked that up.
He's probably 26 because he got drafted before both Tatum and Brown.
Yeah. So, but regardless, I mean, still a lot of potential there. And even if he's just this role, he's, like you mentioned, played it very well. And I mean, we'll see. Apparently, there's that video of him Poole saying they're gonna get their bag soon. Which are you gonna get it from Golden State or somewhere? We'll talk about that another time. But yeah,
they're winning titles. They'll spend that luxury tax money. So
you can only spend so much, but we'll see. It's an NBA. But nonetheless, like we already mentioned, just a great assimilation by the Warriors. And I guess we can jump to anything else you want to mention before we jump to the next part.